The neon lights of Dravis 4 flickered in the thick, polluted air as Ronan Voss pushed open the rusted metal door of Tavora's repair bay. The place smelled of burning circuits, engine grease, and something acrid he couldn't quite place. The walls were lined with half-disassembled machines, old droid parts, and glowing alien tech that pulsed with an eerie blue light. It was the kind of place you went to when you were desperate, when no high-end repair shop would touch your problem. And Ronan was nothing if not desperate. His combat droid, K-07, stood beside him, its once sleek plating now covered in scorch marks and deep gouges. The unit's right arm sparked, and its optical sensors flickered. K-07 had saved his life more times than he could count, but now the machine was barely holding together, just like its owner. Behind the cluttered workbench, Tavora Zek, the siren mechanic, lifted her head. She had 4 arms, each one working on a separate project, and a pair of deep violet eyes that seemed to glow beneath her welding goggles. Her long, scaled tendrils, which served as hair, coiled slightly as she noticed Ronan. "Well, Tavora said, setting down a plasma torch. "You look like you lost a fight with a black hole." Ronan grunted and tapped K-07's dented chest. "The droid needs repairs. Took some heavy hits in a skirmish." Tavora stood, stretching her extra limbs, and walked around K-07, running a scanner over its frame. She clicked her tongue. "Your droid's a mess. Power core is unstable, servos are shot, and its AI core is, let's just say it's holding on by a miracle." She paused, then turned her gaze to Ronan, scanning him instead. "But honestly, you look worse." Ronan scowled. "Just fix the droid." Tavora ignored him. She stepped closer, her sharp eyes studying him like a broken machine. "Your cybernetics are outdated," she said. "Your neural interface is lagging, which means your reaction time is slowing down. You've got stress fractures in your reinforced bones, and I'm guessing those implants of yours hurt like hell, don't they?" Ronan clenched his jaw. He hated how easily she read him. She wasn't wrong. His body was failing him. The military had outfitted him with top-tier cybernetics once, but that was years ago. The tech was aging, degrading, and so was he. Each day, it got harder to move, harder to fight, harder to be himself. He was breaking down, piece by piece, just like K-07. "The droid first," he said flatly. Tavora sighed and rolled her 4 eyes. Stubborn human. She turned back to K-07 and started pulling off damaged plating with practiced ease. "I'll fix the bot, but you should think about letting me fix you, too." Ronan gave a dry chuckle. "I don't need fixing." Tavora didn't even look up. "Sure, keep telling yourself that, rust bucket." He crossed his arms, leaning against the workbench as Tavora continued her work. He hated being here, hated feeling weak. But most of all, he hated the small part of himself that knew she was right. Ronan sat on a metal crate, arms crossed, watching as Tavora Zek worked on K-07. The mechanic moved with inhuman precision, her 4 arms operating different tools at once. Sparks flew as she welded new plating onto the droid's damaged frame. One of her hands held a diagnostic tablet, scanning for deeper issues, while another carefully reconnected severed circuits. She made it look easy, like fixing a combat-class droid was no harder than tuning up an old speeder. K-07 twitched as power surged through its systems. The droid's optical sensors flickered back to life. Diagnostic scan. 37% functional, the droid reported in a static-filled voice. Structural integrity. Compromised. Self-repair. Ineffective. Tavora tusked. "Yeah, no kidding, buddy. You've been held together by hope and duct tape." She reached for another tool, but before she continued, she turned her sharp, glowing eyes toward Ronan. "And speaking of things that shouldn't be running, let's talk about you." Ronan exhaled sharply. Not this again. Tavora leaned against the workbench, crossing 2 of her arms while the other 2 continued working on K-07. "Your cybernetics are failing, Ronan. I could hear the servos in your arms straining when you walked in here. And don't even try to tell me your neural link isn't glitching. How long before your implants shut down completely?" Ronan didn't answer. Tavora's gaze softened, just a little. "You think I don't know what it's like?" she asked. "To be patched together, bit by bit, until you're not sure where the metal ends and the real you begins." Ronan clenched his fists. His cybernetic fingers whirred, stiff and unresponsive. He did know that feeling. It was all he'd known since the Scari uprising, since the war that left him more machine than man. His implants had kept him alive, but they were breaking him down. Every movement was slower, every fight was harder. He didn't feel like himself anymore. But admitting that, letting someone fix him, that wasn't something he was ready to do. "I'll manage," Ronan muttered. "I always do." Tavora scoffed. "You say that now, but when your neural interface fries itself mid-battle, then what? You think Valkyr Industries gave you lifetime support? They built you to last long enough to fight their wars, then break." She grabbed a small scanning device and pointed it at Ronan's chest. "And guess what? You're right on schedule." A sharp jolt ran through Ronan's spine. His vision glitched for half a second, and his limbs tensed involuntarily. Damn it. Tavora wasn't lying. His body was breaking down faster than he'd admitted, even to himself. Tavora sighed, shaking her head. "You're just like K-07. Both of you are running on borrowed time. But at least he is letting me fix him." She patted the droid's newly reinforced plating. "And when I'm done, he'll be better than ever." Ronan exhaled through his nose, frustration boiling under his skin. "Look, I appreciate the concern." "Do you?" Tavora interrupted, raising a brow. "Because right now, you're acting like a prideful idiot with a death wish." Ronan shot her a glare, but she didn't flinch. He hated to admit it, but Tavora wasn't wrong. He'd been ignoring the warning signs, pushing forward out of sheer stubbornness. He always thought he could handle it. But what if this time he couldn't? A loud beep interrupted the moment. K-07's systems fully rebooted, and the droid straightened, its optics glowing bright blue. Operational status restored. Tavora grinned, wiping her hands off. "There we go. One fixed droid. Now, the question is," she turned her piercing gaze back to Ronan, "do you want to be next?" Ronan hesitated. His instincts told him to refuse, to walk out of the shop and keep surviving his way. But his body was screaming for relief. For once, he wasn't sure if he could afford to keep ignoring the truth. Ronan paced inside Tavora's repair bay, his boots clanking against the metal floor. His combat droid, K-07, stood nearby, fully repaired, its blue optics glowing steadily. The droid was ready for battle again, stronger than before. Tavora had done a damn good job fixing it. But now that K-07 was operational, Ronan had no more reason to stay. So why was he still here? His cybernetics ached, the servos in his arms sluggish, his neural link glitching for half a second, making his vision flicker. "It's getting worse." He gritted his teeth and flexed his fingers. The stiffness wasn't going away. Tavora moved around the shop, sorting through old tech, humming a strange tune under her breath. Ronan's eyes wandered across the cluttered shelves. Rows of alien devices, broken drones, and mechanical limbs. Some of the tech was human-made, military-grade stuff. But then his gaze landed on something else. A piece of Siren exo-armor, half buried under dust. The dark plating was cracked, but still carried the sharp, elegant design of Siren warrior. His stomach twisted. "I know that armor." Tavora caught his stare and let out a soft sigh. "That's from the Scari uprising, isn't it?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Ronan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The memories hit him like a shockwave. The battlefield. Smoke and fire. The sky burning red with laser fire. He had fought Sirens once. Killed them. He remembered how their exo-armor made them faster, stronger. He remembered how they moved, graceful, efficient, deadly. He remembered the moment his squad had stormed their bunkers, his cybernetics giving him an edge no normal human had. He remembered the bodies. Tavora stepped closer, watching him. "I lost people in that war, too," she said, voice steady. "Not soldiers, civilians, engineers, my family." Ronan's jaw tightened. "It was a war," he said, his voice rough. "People die." Tavora's eyes flashed. "That's not an answer." He turned away, clenching his fists. "No, it's not." She didn't press him. Instead, she walked over to the armor, lifted it carefully with her lower arms, and studied it. "You humans built your cyber soldiers to be stronger, faster, deadlier," she mused. "But no one ever asked if you'd survive what came after." Ronan exhaled slowly. "We survived." Tavora tilted her head. "Did you?" Her words sank into him like a blade. His body had survived, sure. His implants had kept him breathing, kept him fighting. But his mind, his soul. Maybe that's why he never let anyone fix his cybernetics. Maybe that's why he kept moving from one fight to the next. If he stopped, if he let himself get repaired, he'd have to face what was left of him. Tavora set the armor down and dusted off her hands. "You don't have to say anything," she said, "but I see what's happening to you. You're breaking down. And it's not just the metal parts." Ronan met her gaze. He saw no pity there, only understanding. And somehow, that was worse. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he could keep running from himself. Ronan sat on the edge of a rusted workbench, staring at his cybernetic hand. The metal fingers twitched slightly, stiff and unresponsive. He clenched his fist, forcing the servos to obey, but the movement was slow, too slow. Damn it. He had always prided himself on being faster than his enemies, stronger than normal soldiers. But now, he was falling apart, and no amount of stubbornness could change that. Tavora stood across the room, leaning against a pile of scrap parts. Her violet eyes studied him, sharp but not unkind. "You know, Ronan," she said, crossing two of her arms while the other two idly adjusted a plasma wrench, "you remind me of an old warship. Sturdy, battle-scarred, still moving, even though the engines are failing and the hull is cracked." Ronan exhaled through his nose. "You got a point, or are you just enjoying watching me suffer?" Tavora chuckled. "I always enjoy watching stubborn humans suffer. But yeah, I have a point." She gestured toward his arm. "That thing isn't going to hold up much longer. Your neural link is deteriorating. If it fails completely, your cybernetics will shut down, maybe permanently. You might wake up one day and find half your body won't move." Ronan frowned. He knew she wasn't exaggerating. The tremors were getting worse. His reaction time had slowed. In a real fight, that would get him killed. He ran a hand through his short, dark hair, frustration boiling inside him. "I don't have time for repairs," he muttered. "Not now. I've got a job to finish." Tavora raised a brow. "A job? Let me guess. Some mercenary contract. Another war you don't belong in." Ronan didn't answer. She sighed and walked over, her footsteps light despite the metal grating beneath them. "Ronan, tell me something. When's the last time you fought for something other than survival?" He tensed. What kind of question is that? He had spent his whole life fighting. For his squad, for his mission, for his own damn life. That was enough, wasn't it? Tavora studied his face. "You think survival is enough," she murmured. "But I've seen people like you before. You're not just running from death. You're running from yourself." Roman's fists clenched. "You don't know me." Tavora tilted her head, her scaled tendrils shifting slightly. "I know your type. Warriors who don't know how to stop fighting. Machines that keep running long after the war is over." She tapped a clawed finger against his metal arm. "But machines break, Ronan. Even the best ones. Silence stretched between them. The only sound was the hum of machinery and the faint crackle of a welding torch in the back of the shop. Finally, Tavora sighed and shook her head. "Look, you don't have to trust me, but at least let me fix your cybernetics before they fail completely. I won't even charge you extra for being stubborn." Ronan smirked slightly. "That generous, huh?" Tavora rolled her eyes. "I just don't want to be the one dragging your broken body out of a gutter when your systems crash." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Logic told him she was right. If he didn't let her repair his implants, he was one fight away from becoming a liability to himself and anyone watching his back. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. Do it." Tavora grinned, already grabbing her tools. "Good choice, Rust Bucket." As she powered up the diagnostic scanner, Ronan sat still, forcing himself to accept something he had been avoiding for years. He wasn't invincible, and if he wanted to keep surviving, he had to start trusting someone else to help him. Ronan sat stiffly in the metal chair as Tavora adjusted the scanner over his cybernetic arm. A thin beam of blue light passed over the metal plating, flickering slightly whenever it reached a damaged section. Tavora frowned as she studied the readings on her datapad. "Well," she muttered, "I've seen scrapier junk in better condition than this." Ronan exhaled sharply. "Just fix it." Tavora shook her head, her violet eyes narrowing. "You don't get it, do you? It's not just your arm. Your whole system is failing. Neural links, servo controls, even your spinal interface. You're a walking time bomb." She tapped a clawed finger against the metal plating on his shoulder. "If I don't repair this properly, one day your body just stops working." Ronan gritted his teeth. He knew she wasn't lying. He had felt it. Every hesitation in his movements, every delayed reaction, every moment where his body struggled to keep up with his instincts. But hearing it from her made it real in a way he didn't like. "How long?" he asked. Tavora sighed, glancing at her scanner. "Depends. A few months, maybe. But if you get into a real fight, days, hours, even." He clenched his fists. "That bad, huh?" Tavora adjusted her goggles and cracked her knuckles. "All right, big guy. I'm gonna start repairs. But this isn't just a quick tune-up. I need to get inside the neural interface and clean up the corrupted pathways. That means shutting your system down for a bit." Ronan's jaw tightened. "You mean I'll be helpless?" Tavora smirked. "Yeah, scary thought, huh?" He didn't like this. Not one bit. He had spent years relying on his cybernetics to survive. Letting someone shut them down, even for a few minutes, felt like stepping onto a battlefield unarmed. But he didn't have a choice. "Do it," he said. Tavora nodded. "All right, just don't bite your tongue when I reboot you." She tapped a few commands into her datapad, and suddenly, Roman's body locked up. His limbs went rigid. His vision flickered, the cybernetic HUD in his right eye glitching before vanishing completely. A sharp jolt ran down his spine. And then, nothing. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely even breathe. For the first time in years, Ronan felt truly vulnerable. Tavora worked fast. Her forearms moved with expert precision, removing damaged wiring, reconnecting circuits, replacing old components with upgraded ones. She muttered to herself as she worked, occasionally glancing at Ronan's face. "Still awake in there?" she asked, even though she knew he couldn't answer. "Good. That means I didn't fry your brain yet." Ronan focused on his breathing. The sensation of helplessness gnawed at him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had survived worse. Tavora continued working, her expression unusually focused. "You know, most people who come in here for repairs actually take care of their cybernetics," she said. "But you've been running yourself into the ground like you don't even care what happens to you." She tightened a connection in his arm, and a faint spark flickered. "Which makes me wonder," she continued, her voice quieter now. "Do you?" Ronan wanted to answer, wanted to say, "Of course I care." But did he? He had spent so long moving from one fight to the next, never stopping, never thinking about the future. Because what was the future for someone like him? A soldier built for war. Tavora sighed. We'll talk about that later. She made one final adjustment, then pressed a button on her datapad. A sudden jolt shot through Ronan's body, like being hit by a shock grenade. His muscles spasmed, his vision blurred. Then everything snapped back into place. The HUD in his cybernetic eye rebooted. His limbs unlocked. His fingers flexed, smoothly, easily, without resistance. He took a slow breath. It worked. Tavora grinned. Well, how's it feel? Ronan rotated his arm. No stiffness, no delay. For the first time in years, he felt whole. He glanced at Tavora. Not bad. She rolled her eyes. You're welcome. Ronan smirked. Maybe, just maybe, he owed her more than just a thank you. Ronan flexed his cybernetic fingers, feeling the smoothness of movement he hadn't had in years. Tavora had done more than just repair him. She had rebuilt him, made him better. He should have felt relieved. Instead, unease sat heavy in his chest. Tavora smirked, crossing two of her arms while the other two sorted through her tools. Well, big guy, you're officially less of a rust bucket now. Ronan rolled his shoulder. You do good work. Obviously. She leaned back against the workbench. So what now? You planning to run off and get yourself wrecked again? Ronan didn't answer right away. He should leave. He had a job to finish, and now that his cybernetics were working again, there was nothing stopping him. But something in the way Tavora looked at him, curious, almost expectant, made him hesitate. I have business to take care of, he said finally. Tavora raised a brow. Oh yeah? The kind that involves getting shot at. Ronan smirked slightly. Most business does. Tavora huffed, shaking her head. You humans are impossible. Before Ronan could respond, the workshop's entrance slammed open with a metallic clang. His instincts kicked in immediately. His hand went to his sidearm, body tense, ready for a fight. But when he saw who stood in the doorway, his blood ran cold. A Soiran, tall, armored, and unmistakably dangerous. The alien's skin was deep obsidian, with shimmering silver patterns running across his face and arms. His eyes, glowing gold, locked onto Ronan like a predator spotting prey. Ronan's grip on his pistol tightened. He had seen that face before. General Varric of the Suran War Council. Tavora tensed but didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't know I was offering repair services to the Siren military, she said, voice carefully neutral. Varric ignored her. He stepped forward, every movement controlled, deliberate. Ronan Voss, he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of steel. You look well. Ronan's jaw clenched. Can't say the same about you, Varric. Tavora's eyes flickered between them. You two know each other. Varric's expression didn't change. We fought on opposite sides. Ronan felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. More than that, Varric wasn't just some enemy commander. He was the commander, the one responsible for the Skari uprising, the war that had cost Ronan his squad, his old life, and most of his humanity. Ronan's fingers itched to pull the trigger, but Varric wasn't here to fight. Not yet. I need your help, Varric said. Tavora let out a sharp laugh. Oh, this should be good. Ronan narrowed his eyes. You have 5 seconds to give me a reason not to shoot you. Varric remained calm. Because the war we fought, it was never supposed to end the way it did. Ronan stiffened. What the hell are you talking about? Varric exhaled, his gold eyes darkening. There are things you don't know, Ronan, about the war. About what really happened. About why you and I were sent to kill each other. Silence filled the room. Ronan could hear his own heartbeat. Lies. It has to be. But something in Varric's expression, something unshaken, something haunted, made Ronan pause. Tavora crossed her arms. You better start explaining fast, big guy. Because if you think Ronan is just gonna trust you, you're more broken than his cybernetics were. Varric met Ronan's gaze, his voice steady. The real enemy is still out there, and they're coming for all of us. Ronan's grip on his pistol loosened slightly. Damn it. He had a feeling he wasn't going anywhere just yet. Ronan crossed his arms, his expression hard. He didn't trust Varric, not even a little, but the Siren General wasn't the type to make up stories. If he had come all this way to track Ronan down, then whatever he was about to say was serious. Tavora leaned against her workbench, arms folded. "All right, golden eyes," she said, staring at Varric. "You've got our attention. Now explain before Ronan decides to rearrange your face with a plasma round." Varric remained calm, but there was a tightness in his stance. He glanced at Ronan. "The war we fought, it was never meant to be won by either side." Ronan's jaw clenched. "What the hell does that mean?" Varric exhaled, his golden eyes flickering with something unreadable. "It means someone else was pulling the strings, someone who wanted both humanity and Sirens to burn." Tavora raised a brow. "And who exactly is this mystery villain?" Varric's voice was grim. "The Erebus Directive." Ronan frowned. He had heard rumors about Erebus during his time in the military. A Black Ops faction, hidden deep within human command, operating outside all laws and treaties. They weren't just soldiers. They were engineers of war, manipulating conflicts from the shadows. But they were supposed to be a myth, a ghost story for mercenaries and veterans who needed someone to blame for the wars they lost. Ronan scoffed. "You're telling me that Erebus is real?" Varric's expression didn't change. "Real, and more dangerous than anything we faced before." Tavora tilted her head. "And what do they want?" Varric hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They don't care about victory. They don't care about peace. Their only goal is perpetual war, a galaxy constantly on fire, where weapons never stop being built, where soldiers are always needed." He looked directly at Ronan. "They orchestrated the war between us, Ronan. They wanted both Sirens and humans to weaken each other, and we played right into their hands." Ronan's fists clenched. "You're telling me my squad died for nothing?" Varric's voice was cold. "I'm telling you they died because someone wanted them to." The words hit Ronan like a punch to the gut. Tavora exhaled, rubbing her temple. "Okay, let's say I believe you. What does Erebus want now?" Varric's face darkened. "They're planning something big, bigger than any war we've seen. I've spent years gathering intel, following their movements, and I found something." He pulled out a small holodisc from his belt and placed it on the table. A flickering projection appeared, schematics, battle plans, encrypted messages. Tavora narrowed her eyes. "That's a lot of firepower." Ronan studied the projection. His gut twisted as he recognized the layout. A weapons facility. No, a war factory. Varric's voice was grim. "Erebus is building an army. And they're not just using human tech. They're using Siren weapons, Scari biotechnology, even stolen alien artifacts." He pointed at the schematics. "This facility is their main hub. We take it down. We stop their operations before they can unleash whatever they're planning." Ronan inhaled deeply. This wasn't just a mission. This was a chance to hit back at the people who had manipulated his entire life, who had cost him his squad, his friends, his future. Tavora glanced between the two of them. "You're seriously considering this?" Ronan met her gaze. "I didn't fight all these years just to let them win." Tavora sighed. "You humans and your hero complexes." Then she smirked. "Fine. I'm in. But if I die, I'm haunting both of you." Varric nodded. "We'll need a ship, weapons, and a plan." Ronan cracked his knuckles. "Then we better get started." Ronan stood at the edge of the landing platform, staring at the warship they had just stolen. It wasn't the prettiest thing he had ever flown. Scorch marks covered its hull, and the left thruster sputtered every few seconds, but it would get the job done. Tavora wiped oil off her hands as she walked up beside him. All right, I patched up what I could. She won't explode mid-flight, probably. Ronan gave her a look. Probably. Tavora grinned. Where's the fun without a little risk? Behind them, Varric stepped up the boarding ramp, his golden eyes scanning the area. We don't have much time. Erebus will know something is wrong soon. Ronan took one last look at the abandoned shipyard before stepping onto the warship. The interior was just as rough as the exterior. Flickering lights, exposed wiring, and the faint smell of burnt circuits. Tavora climbed into the pilot's seat, flipping switches as the engines hummed to life. All right, gentlemen, buckle up. The ship lurched as it lifted off, shaking violently before stabilizing. Ronan gripped the armrest, watching the stars blur as they punched through the atmosphere. Varric leaned against the control panel. The Erebus facility is on a remote asteroid, heavily fortified. We'll need to disable their defenses before we can land. Tavora smirked. Lucky for you, I love breaking things. Ronan studied the holomap. The facility was massive, built deep into the rock, with automated turrets and shield generators surrounding the perimeter. A full frontal assault would be suicide. We go in quiet, Ronan said. Find their command center, take out their security systems, then blow the whole damn place up. Varric nodded. Agreed. Tavora tapped the controls. Stealth approach it is, but once we get spotted, things are gonna get messy. Ronan smirked. Then we make it messier for them. The ship sped through the void, approaching the asteroid under the cover of its thin atmosphere. From a distance, the Erebus facility looked like a sleeping giant, dark metal towers rising from the rock, blinking red lights marking the edges of the landing platforms. Tavora activated the ship's cloaking field. All right, we're in their blind spot, but it won't hold forever. Ronan and Varric moved toward the airlock, checking their weapons. Ronan's pulse rifle hummed as it powered up, and Varric's twin energy blades flickered to life. Tavora gave them a mock salute. Try not to die, boys. Ronan smirked. No promises. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped out into the darkness. Their boots touched down on cold metal, the silence of space pressing in around them. Ronan's cybernetic HUD scanned the area, 3 guards patrolling near the control panel. Varric moved first, silent as a shadow. In one swift motion, he lunged, his blades slicing through the first guard before the others could react. Ronan fired 2 quick shots, dropping the remaining soldiers before they could raise an alarm. Varric knelt beside the control panel, his fingers flying over the interface. Disabling the outer defenses now. A red warning light flashed. Alert. Unauthorized access DTCTED. Ronan cursed. They know we're here. Tavora's voice crackled through their earpieces. Guys, you've got incoming. Ronan looked up just as the first wave of Erebus soldiers stormed onto the platform, weapons raised. Varric stood beside him, blades glowing. Looks like we're doing this the hard way. Ronan grinned, raising his rifle. Wouldn't have it any other way. And then the battle began. Blaster fire exploded around Ronan as he took cover behind a metal crate. The Erebus soldiers were well trained, their shots precise. But he had faced worse. He peeked out, aimed, and took down 2 before ducking back. Varric moved like a phantom, his twin energy blades cutting through enemies with deadly precision. Every slash sent sparks flying, every movement a blur of speed and power. A soldier tried to flank him. Varric spun and plunged a blade straight through his chest. Tavora's voice crackled through their earpieces. Not to rush you guys, but I've got gunships inbound, and our stolen ship shields won't hold forever. Ronan reloaded, his cybernetic arm whirring as he snapped a fresh power cell into place. We need to reach the control room. If we don't shut down their operations now, we'll never get another chance. Varric nodded. Then we pushed forward. They moved fast, taking out guards as they stormed deeper into the facility. Ronan led the way, his rifle barking out rapid bursts. An alarm blared overhead, red lights flashing as security doors slammed shut. Tavora groaned in his earpiece. "They're locking you in. I'll try to override it, but you better start blowing things up if you want out." Ronan smirked. "Already on it." He grabbed a det pack from his belt, slapped it onto the nearest door, and detonated it. The explosion rocked the hallway, sending shrapnel flying. Smoke filled the air as the metal door crumbled. "Move," Ronan shouted, charging through the broken entrance. Inside, the control room was a chaos of blinking monitors and scrambling Erebus operatives. A high-ranking officer reached for his weapon, but Varric's blade found him first. Ronan stormed to the main console, his cybernetic fingers plugging into the system. Data flooded his HUD. Battle strategies, Black Ops missions, weapon shipments. Proof. Everything they needed to expose Erebus. "I'm downloading their entire database," he said. "Tavora, prep the ship for emergency evac." She laughed. "Way ahead of you, boss." Varric stood by the door, his golden eyes scanning the hallway. "We won't have long. Troops are regrouping." Ronan finished the download and triggered the facility's self-destruct sequence. "All right," he said, turning toward Varric. "Let's burn this place to the ground." They raced back the way they came, dodging enemy fire as explosions shook the facility. The walls cracked, smoke billowing from vents. Erebus soldiers scrambled to escape, but Ronan had no sympathy. By the time they reached the landing pad, Tavora had the ship hovering. Ramp lowered. "Move, move, move," she yelled. Ronan and Varric leaped onto the ramp just as a final explosion ripped through the base, sending a fireball into the sky. The shockwave slammed into the ship, but Tavora gritted her teeth and gunned the engines. The warship shot into space, breaking free of the asteroid's gravity just as the entire facility collapsed into fire and debris. Ronan slumped into a seat, catching his breath. His hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of victory. Varric sat across from him, silent. Then, after a long pause, he said, "It's over." Ronan exhaled, shaking his head. "No, it's just beginning." Tavora smirked from the cockpit. "So, what's next, boys?" Ronan looked at the holodrive in his hand, the proof of Erebus's crimes, the proof that war had never been about winning, only about keeping the galaxy in flames. "We take the fight to them," he said, and as their ship disappeared into the vastness of space, Ronan knew one thing for certain. The real war was just getting started.